Shadiversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and it's happened again. Well, it's happened a couple of times it happens all the time, I should really say, and I've made a mistake, as I've done in the past, and I'm sure I will do into the future. But this is the thing about, getting things wrong, is it's actually quite an opportunity, all right? Well, not everyone understands this, and honestly I didn't understand this when I was a teenager for a good long time. I was actually quite insecure, quite defensive and stuff like that, because that's how it can kind of, strike people who are insecure, like I was, is if we're wrong, we take that as like a personal failing, okay? We feel less of ourselves and stuff like that, and we fight to be right, even when it becomes really irrational. But no, luckily, thanks to good examples in my life, I've learnt that it's not a big thing. If you're wrong, all you have to do is admit that you're wrong. And the wonderful thing about this is that you end up gaining more truth by doing this, okay? If you never admit that you're wrong, you never grow, you never learn, and that's a problem. And so I've always taken it from, ever since learning the right way, okay, from good examples, stuff like that, to take things like this as an opportunity, okay? And in actual fact, to be grateful of it, because if I don't get things wrong, okay, I can never be corrected in that incorrect idea I had. Now you might say, well, wouldn't it have been better just to get the right information in the first place? Do you have any idea how difficult that is in the world today, all right? There is so much misinformation everywhere that it's so easy to be misinformed. But the advantage, okay, about being misinformed in something is that when we take on that incorrect idea and voice it in the presence of someone who actually does know the correct thing, they hopefully will then correct us, and then we'll get to know the truth. And if we didn't get misinformed, we wouldn't have spoken, no one would have corrected us, and we would have actually known less, okay, as a result. And this is why I love this saying, and I've mentioned it on my channel a few times, and I'll mention it again, is that it's better to know the incorrect thing about a subject than nothing at all. If it doesn't lead to harm, I'll add that kind of a caveat there, if it doesn't lead to direct harm, because it is having that incorrect knowledge that will often lead us to gaining the correct knowledge. And if we weren't misinformed in the first place, we never would have had the opportunity to learn what the truth was. So just like many times in the past, I'm actually quite grateful for the fact that I did get things wrong. And in this instance as well, I'm also grateful and appreciative of this as well. So this is another I was wrong video. I'm going to address some of the things that I've gotten wrong, in the more recent or longish timeline of this channel, and also addressing a rather significant goof I made in the video I uploaded yesterday. So I think I'll address the most recent one, the video I uploaded yesterday on MacGuffins, and move on from there. But if you know anything about me, I like to ramble, and there is just, one other thing, or who knows, it might turn into a couple of things I'd like to mention before I jump onto the individual subjects. And it's in what I try to do in between these larger, I was wrong videos, in correcting myself and giving you guys the most correct information that I have access to. Now, the tricky thing is finding out what is the correct information. It's always a challenge, especially in subjects that are hotly debated and there's no hard and fast, this is it. And so when it comes to things like that, when it's more opinion, I can't really say yay or nay when one of you shares something in the comments. But when one of you guys do share something in comments with good sources that I can kind of double check and say, oh, all right then, yeah, I got that wrong. What I do is I pin that comment to the top of the video. So the more recent one that I've done this to is just a very clear but important correction on the swordbreaker. So look, this is something I do my best. YouTube used to have this wonderful thing where you could add in annotations where writing would appear on the screen in front of everything on the video, and that was a great way to make corrections where I could say, no, this is wrong, here's a quick little correction or clarification, stuff like that. You can't do that anymore. And so it actually makes it far more difficult. And in the past where I've made pretty bad videos that are horribly wrong, I've left them up, but I added huge annotations over the whole, screen that lasted the whole length of the video saying, this is wrong, go to check out this video. But I can't do that anymore. And when I make a video that's particularly wrong, okay, I can't really leave it up because I don't want that video misinforming people, and it's not a simple matter of a small correction that can be, covered in a comment that's pinned to the top or anything like that. So in that case, I think it's best to take the video down, and that's what I've done with my MacGuffin video. Actually, instead, I've decided to make the video unlisted because even though I misidentify what a MacGuffin is, the things that I talk about in that video are still instructive regarding plot devices as objects. So I'll put a link in the description below, just replace every reference I make to MacGuffin to just simple plot device, and I'll explain what a real MacGuffin is later on in this video when I make my correction. Now, if there has been some of you who have made comments trying to correct things that you feel that I've gotten wrong, and I haven't been pinned, that can be due to a number of reasons. One, I might not have seen it. I get a lot of them. I do my best reading the comments, but I don't get to see them all, unfortunately. Many can slip under the radar. Or it could be that I don't think there's enough evidence for me to change my opinion just yet. You know, you might be right, but I just, you know, I might need more sources, or I have other sources that are kind of contradicting it, and it falls into more of an opinion, and it's a more still debated topic and stuff like that. And so in those instances, I can't really say, yes, look, you're right, here's a pinned comment and stuff like that. I just have to let it lie for now until I get more information, and then perhaps I might make a follow-up video on that very subject, which I've done many times in the past already. Okay, so, you know, the blood has been in the water for long enough. We're all circling around it. Let's dive in and actually take a bite out of the meat of this video. What has been the things that I've gotten wrong more recently? I'll address the larger goof, you know, in the video that I just made yesterday about MacGuffins first. And basically, I misidentified what a MacGuffin is quite solidly through the whole video. How did I get this wrong? Well, the simple fact is the person that taught me about MacGuffins was also wrong, okay? And I had no reason to question him because he was very credible on all the other things that he was talking about. And you might have picked out in my video how I was actually kind of defining a MacGuffin different to a plot device. And the way I was explaining is, and the way that I kind of formally understood it, was that a MacGuffin was specifically an object in a story that was serving the plot. Essentially, it was a plot device that was an object, and that was specifically separate to a different or a regular plot device, which was either a mechanic in the story, plot, or characters. So a character who had a desire for vengeance, okay? That desire for vengeance I would have considered a plot device, or a mechanic in the setting or magic or whatever, like true love's, you know, the true love's kiss can thaw a broken heart or bring people back from unconsciousness or death and stuff like that. That would also be a plot device, but if it was an object, I had considered that a MacGuffin, which of course is incorrect. A MacGuffin device specifically is a more kind of restricted type of plot device. And as many of you pointed out to me, a proper MacGuffin often has no narrative explanation and often does nothing in the actual plot apart from how the characters react or respond to it. And so therefore, because the Infinity Stones actually do something, because, you know, Lord of the One Ring from Lord of the Rings does something, these aren't actual MacGuffins. A more accurate MacGuffin would be, say, the Holy Grail in the King Arthur series, because you never actually see it. The characters, depending on the version, but most of the versions, they don't actually find it or grab it. And so another example of a MacGuffin would be a cursed forest, and no one ever goes into the forest to find out it's cursed. No one actually gets a curse. The forest doesn't do anything to them. It's just there to make the characters never go in that direction or to the forest. And there we go, it's a MacGuffin. And so with that misunderstanding, most of the things that I talk about in that video was basically general things about plot devices as objects. Okay, so look, there you go. I might make a proper video on plot devices in the future and be able to kind of clarify MacGuffins in the context of a video dedicated to that subject, but I certainly am correcting myself here, and I felt that the best action for me to do was to take the previous video down, because with the main context being incorrect and not being able to add annotations, stuff like that, I felt that was the best course of action. But the wonderful thing about this is that now I know more, and if I didn't make the video that I made on MacGuffins, I wouldn't have been corrected by you guys, because I had no reason to question the information I had. Therefore, I had no reason to study it further, because, you know, the guy was solid, and it's like, okay, that's a good understanding, makes sense in my mind, and there we go. So this is a good thing, and I'm actually grateful that it's happened. Now, I have actually tried to keep a list of certain corrections that I've wanted to make over the past half year to year and stuff like that, but because generally it's handled mostly by pinning a comment up to the, you know, top of the video and stuff like that, I haven't really been hung up on any major slip-ups and stuff like that, because they haven't really been major, but they have been, some have been significant enough, and so I'll try and mention the ones that I have made note of, you know, for this video. And so the next one I want to mention is the one that I already kind of referenced, was Swordbreaker, okay? Because in the Swordbreaker video, I mentioned that I felt one of the only ways you could make them was in grinding out the sections, but someone, of course, who was thinking more clearly than I was at the time of making the video, said, no, Shad, you can actually, you know, use heat up the metal and then get like a shape and stamp out those sections on the metal. And I am actually aware of this smithing technique, but, you know, the dots weren't connecting and stuff like that. And when they pointed out, I was like, of course, that makes so much sense. You know, I'm an idiot. And I pinned that comment up to the top of the video, which also then makes the, you know, ability to make a sword breaker far easier than I was assuming in the video. So it recontextualized some of that video, and there's good discussion under that comment about, okay, if they're more affordable, maybe we could fit them into fantasy and settings and stuff like this, and maybe they weren't as prominent for other different reasons, and so I'll definitely acknowledge that and correct myself there. The next correction I'd like to make is something I said in my reviews of Outlaw King. And I mentioned that I loved that they had, coifs, okay, male coifs that were riveted, okay, and they actually kind of more close fitting and stuff like that. But then I said that there should be huge amounts of padding underneath, and I showed some pictures from, I believe it was the Norman Bible, the Macajowski Bible, that has pictures of male coifs, and their heads are kind of bulbous and stuff like that. And I mentioned that this is a result of padding. Turns out that assertion is far more debated than not. And Ian Lespina, the great Ian Lespina, shared a comment in the video saying, actually, one of the reasons we think that these heads are so bulbous is that there are other pictures where the coifs are down and they still have helmets underneath, that they're actually wearing skull caps underneath. And so the padding under a male coif might not be so huge as I was saying in that video, and the bulbous heads is due to the fact that they were wearing skull caps under the coifs, which was obviously done in some circumstances, thanks to the references he shared. So good correction. That was actually a great thing to know, because I actually didn't know, people wore skull caps underneath their male coifs in some circumstances in the medieval period. So I'm really grateful for Ian sharing that comment, and now I'm relaying that information to you so you all know. Going a bit further back now to my video where I talk about why medieval buildings are made out of, kind of white rectangles, and I'm talking about wattle and daubed half timber homes, and I kind of talk about cost effectiveness. And I felt at the time of making the video that making a timber framed home was easier and more cost effective than making a log cabin, where the home was made out of horizontal laid logs. Well, it turns out after further reading on the matter, it seems like making a log cabin home is probably maybe a bit easier than the wattle and daubed half timber homes. In terms of ease, well, the joins are nowhere near as complex to be made, and it's not as fiddly as making a full frame, but it requires a lot more wood. On the topic of wood, another thing that I want to address is some of the assumptions that I made about squaring up timber versus working with round logs. And this one, look, like it's something that a few people have mentioned, and I don't know if they are correct, yet their arguments are logical enough to the point where I don't know if my own arguments are correct now, because both seem decently valid. And it's basically the argument that squaring up a timber is actually far easier, and even if it does take more time, it is far more beneficial to use squared timbers in any type of construction, whether this is a timber castle or even a cottage and stuff like that, because you can make joins a lot easier with squared up timbers. They're a lot easier to work with, and cutting off the side and stuff like that doesn't actually take as much time as I was really saying, so that very well could be the case. And there's another thing that I want to mention regarding wood. I'm having a very woody time, aren't I? But anyway, is the matter of making planks. Now, I've been aware of the fact that one of the ways you can make planks is by getting a log and splitting it down the line, and then, like hammering in a wedge and splitting a section just a little bit around, the radius, and splitting out a plank that way, and then smoothing it off with a plane and stuff like that. And I just wasn't fully aware of the time periods when this was done. I knew the Vikings did it, or just the Viking period, and a bit later, but it turns out that practice had remained fairly consistent all the way into the medieval period as well. Saws, of course, became more prominent in the medieval period. They had water-powered sawmills on top of that, and one of the ways in which they could, cut up a log into planks and stuff like that was with a framed saw, something really big, but it's in a frame, and then there's a metal saw, and then they put it like the log on these, stands. There's a man standing above holding the saw this way, and there's one underneath, and they saw it all the way down the middle. And of course, by doing it this way, you get a very straight line, and the finish is a lot cleaner, but they were still making planking out of splitting logs in this period, and I was actually quite surprised how smooth a finish you could get on a plank that was split, because I watched a documentary and saw them doing this, and I was like, okay, they've convinced me. Splitting, done, later in the medieval period, quite, quick to do, and honestly does give a pretty nice finish. And my assertions about planking is that it takes a lot more work to do it in the medieval period, and ergo it would be more expensive. And seeing planking thrown away on just kind of roofing and other things like that, I was saying I'm not sure about that, because if it was more expensive, you would need it for flooring on second levels and higher, but for things that you could use cheaper materials materials for, I was a bit dubious on. And look, there still might be some validity to that if you want to use timber planking to make, you know, roofs and stuff like that over tiles, which were probably the best, you know, method of making things, or wooden shingles and stuff like that. Shingles are easier than making planks, by the way. So look, yeah, they're obviously planking, not as expensive as I've said in one or two videos actually, previous to me making this correction. It's an interesting, sophisticated kind of topic, and look, there's still more that I can learn about this because there are varying different things being said, and there's also, when you look at both sides, like, which one is right? They could both be right. I think there's elements of truth to each one, so just trying to clarify that right here. This could end up being a long video. It turns out my list is a bit longer than I realized. Look, I'll do my best. If you're still finding this interesting on things that I've gotten wrong, well, I hope you're enjoying. Because the next one that I want to talk about is in my analysis of Excalibur, okay? That Excalibur should not look like a medieval sword if we try and look to some of the historical origins of the Arthurian legend. And I only focus on one Arthurian legend, and I do misspeak in that video where I say the most likely version of the Arthurian legend is from some type of Celtic hero and stuff. There's more detail in the video, but there is actually other, you know, sources for the Arthurian tale that I don't mention in that video, so make you aware there if you want to look into it yourself. I think this video is getting a bit too long already, so I'll leave it for now. If I really dive into everything, I'm sure I could just keep going and going and going, because I'm imperfect, just like everyone, and there are many times when I misspeak, and as I've said many times, okay, I hope you guys don't treat me as the gospel truth on any subject, okay? Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Of course, I try to be as accurate as I can, and I only share those things that I believe to be true at the time of speaking, according to the information knowledge that I've gained at that time. But I think I'll end off this video with a quotation from another video that I've made in the past that I think summarizes my own personal view on what I say and how you should regard me as an authority. So I'll end off with that. Thank you for watching, guys, and you know, I'll do my best. I will make mistakes, but I appreciate your patience, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Now everyone, myself included, holds preconceived ideas about so many things, alright? We can't really avoid that because we're not going to study everything in depth, no matter, you know, on every single subject that we ever hear about. Most opinions that we have been formed out of incomplete information. What I really feel we need to do is acknowledge that we honestly don't know the full picture, and be willing to keep the doors open on our conclusions regarding those subjects. Admit if the things that you have heard just came from offhanded remarks from your friends or other people, or you heard them from some random idiot on the internet named Shad. Understand that those things are at best opinions, or at worst, rumors. And even though I included myself in a flippant, joking way when I said that, I do mean it. Don't believe anything I say just because I was the one who said it. I really appreciate that so many people have come to trust my opinion and regard me with a certain level of credibility, but guys, the only credibility I deserve in regards to the things that I say is the pure logic and evidence that I use to explain my views. And even then, that doesn't mean I am right. I'm a human, and humans have proven time and time again how good we are at getting things wrong. So based on that fact alone, you should never take anything I say as definitively correct. Let the things I say inform your own opinions, as well as other people who feel like sharing something that they feel to be legitimate on the subject. And then form your own opinions. And if it just so happens to be the same as one of the things I believe in too, then you can say you came to that on your own intelligence, not because I said so.